Campaign Finance Act was passed and establishes the Campaign Finance Board to administer our campaign finance program. It is a strictly nonpartisan board. There are the mayor has 2 appointments who may not be of the same political party. The council speaker has 2 appointments who are not of the same political party. And the mayor appoints the chair in consultation with the city council speaker. This nonpartisan, rather than strictly bipartisan makeup has enabled an effective and independent administration of our work. The act covers candidates who are seeking elections to 59 offices in New York City. So there are 3 citywide electoral officials in New York City, the mayor, the controller, and the public advocate. There are 5 borough presidents for each of the 5 boroughs, Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, Bronx, Staten Island, and 51 council seats. The Act sets common sense contribution limits. For example, for 2013 elections that we just had in the fall, mayoral candidates could accept no more than $4,950, and city council candidates could accept no more than $2,750. These contribution limits apply to everyone: individuals, labor organizations, political committees, political parties, everyone. Those contributions apply the same to everyone, and they're combined for the primary election and general election, so it's just one limit for the entire election. It ensures that they also apply to every candidate, whether or not they choose to join the voluntary public matching funds program. So every candidate are subject to the same rules and are not rewarded for opting out of the campaign finance program. The Act prohibits the direct contributions to candidates from corporations, limited liability corporations, and partnerships. In addition to those contribution limits, the Act sets lower contribution limits for anyone who has or is actively seeking a business relationship with the city. And New York has one of probably the broadest definitions of who's doing business of lots of jurisdictions have this kind of pay-to-play law. Our law covers people who are contractors, who are bidding on contracts, people who are seeking franchises from the city, economic development agreements, people who are doing real estate deals with the city where lots of big money is, people seeking zoning variants and the like. So it covers a broad range of actors who are seeking or actually have business with the city. Those contribution limits are about 10% of the regular contribution limit. So the doing business limit for mayor is $400. For city council candidates, it's $250. And these limits have been in effect for about 8 years. And they've been really successful at limiting these pay-to-play contributions in New York City elections. In addition to our campaign financing, we have a significant mandates to educate, inform, and engage New York City voters. All the candidates are subject to disclosure requirements. Every campaign must report its financial activity to the board on a regular schedule. That information is made available on our website online in a searchable database. The Campaign Finance Board also administers a debate program for people who are running for citywide office. We publish and distribute a nonpartisan voter guide to every household with a registered voter, once for the primary and once again for the general election. And we work to register and engage New York voters throughout the city. Also in 2013, for the first time, we had a new mandate which required the disclosure of independent spending. And for the very first time, it gave voters a real clear understanding of the role independent spending plays in New York City elections. And I'll talk about that a little bit about how enormous the amount of money was in the New York City elections during this election. But of course, what we're here to talk about, and the centerpiece of the city's program, is our voluntary public matching funds program. Simply stated, there are 2 goals for our program. One is to increase the role of small donor contributions in New York City elections, and the second is to decrease the perception and possibility of corruption associated with large contributions, which increases the public's confidence in their government. Our program matches the first $175 contributed by a individual New York City resident with public matching funds at a rate of $6 for $1. So for an individual's $10 contribution is worth $70 to the candidate. Contributions from non-city residents, political committees, and unions are allowed to be given, but are not matched with public funds, nor are contributions from people who are doing business with the city, that same group I talked about before. The matching funds are available only to candidates who are on the ballot, have an opponent on the ballot, and they also must demonstrate that they are in compliance with the campaign finance laws. Before we receive public matching funds, the candidates have to demonstrate that they have a sufficient amount of public support. And the way they do that is there's a two-part threshold to qualify. So for example, people who are running for city council have to demonstrate that they've raised $5,000 in matchable contributions, so that's contributions of up to $175 from New York City residents, and collect at least 75 contributions of at least $10 from the district they seek to represent. And there's similar thresholds for every level of office. The public funds payments are capped at 55% of the spending limit for each office. So that limitation ensures that every campaign has a mix of private and public funds behind it. And we think that that really has contributed to the success of the program, that mix of private and public money in each campaign. In 2013, the maximum public funds payment available to mayoral candidates was $3.5 million for the election, for the primary and then again for the general. And for city council candidates, the maximum public funds payment was $92,400. So, people think, oh my gosh, that must cost a lot of money. So, so over 7 citywide elections over the 25 years, we've had 7 citywide elections, 2 council-wide redistricting elections, and 18 special elections to fill vacant seats. The net cost of the campaign finance program of public funding has been $146 million, which works out to about $5.6 million per year. And in the multi-billion-dollar New York City budget, it's almost nothing, We tried to figure out what it was per voter and you get down to like 50 cents per voter per year to have an improved electional process. It's really very little. In 2013, the net payment was $33.6 million, and that was the highest amount that we've ever paid out in a citywide election. The second highest, I'm sorry. In joining the program, candidates agree to abide by strict spending limits, and the limits, they obviously vary by office, and ensure that the amount of money raised is not the deciding factor in elections versus participating candidates. In 2013, the participating mayoral candidates could spend up to $6.4 million each in the primary and the general election, and the city council candidates were limited to $168,000 in each race. The Act calls for these limits to be automatically adjusted according to inflation after each 4-year election cycle, which allows the program to keep pace with increasing costs of running a campaign in one of the most expensive cities and media markets in the world. One of the reasons the presidential public financing program didn't keep up because they never changed the amount that they gave. Following each citywide election, the Act requires the Campaign Finance Board to review the program, its effects on candidates' abilities to campaign, and recommend appropriate changes in the law. This regular review of our rules and practices has helped the program evolve over time and meet new challenges. Now more than ever, most candidates believe that public matching funds program offers the best chance to compete. For the 2013 primary election, 87% of the nearly 200 candidates on the ballot were program participants. In the general election, nearly 2/3 of the candidates on the ballot were program participants. One of the key components of our program in making it successful is strong enforcement. The board takes its responsibility to safeguard the public's investment in the political process very seriously. The CFB's record of tough but fair enforcement creates a culture where following the rules matters and compliance with the rules is the norm, not the exception. Candidates for office in New York City know that their campaign finances will be audited thoroughly by the CFB both before, during, and after each election. So pre-election, we carefully review every single claim for matching funds to ensure that candidates qualify for the funds honestly, and candidates who have committed serious violations before the election do not receive public funds. During the election, we verify that candidates are abiding by the rules. After the election, our audits ensure that candidates have accounted for each and every dollar in public funds that they receive. If the money was not spent for their election, we require that money to be spent back, whether it was spent inappropriately or is just left over. There's been not a litigation challenge to the kind of existence of the public matching funds program, although there was some question about, I think original discussions like way back in the 80s about whether the city had the independent authority to pass this law, but there really has not been a challenge to the kind of existence of it. But when the law was changed in 2005 to require disclosure in the contribution limits to apply to all candidates, whether or not they voluntarily joined, we actually expected a challenge, and we only had a challenge this year in 2013, and those limits were upheld by the court. The state law doesn't preempt the city's ability to have these lower contribution limits for city candidates and require the disclosure for city candidates. And that was upheld on appeal. Obviously, we can't regulate those, and Mayor Bloomberg did spend a large amount of money, probably more than certainly more than we spent on the entire program. I don't remember what I said, the number, $146 million. He spent more on his 3 campaigns than that amount in public funds. But, what we did some research, and at that time we had a bonus that we gave more money, which also has been struck down by the Supreme Court, to give more money to people who have running against high-spending non-participants. The conclusion is that the public matching funds gives the opposing candidates enough money to get their message out, and that's what and if you have a good message, and that's all that really should. And in the very last election, in his last election in 2009. He only won by, a very, very small margin, even though he spent $100 million. So, I think that, that's our purpose, is to get, allow people to have enough money to get their message out, and I really think that it does. We have auditors. Every time someone claims, a $10 contribution, our auditors look at the documentation for that before public funds are paid. So we take that very seriously. We also have a whole entire unit of staff that's job it is to do candidate services, to do trainings of candidates, which are mandatory, and to answer questions. And that's what they do. That's their job. They sit there all day and answer questions from candidates. And most candidates are, follow the rules. I'd say some people get, the parking ticket, like everybody, you might have parked illegally and didn't realize it. You filed a disclosure statement late. You did, like you took something that you weren't supposed to, and you were told about it in your audit and you refunded it. But, we spend a lot of time training the candidates and working with them. The debates are required by participants. So if you're a participant in the public matching funds program and you're running for citywide office, you have to debate. That was the reason debate law was passed to begin with, because in 1993, both Giuliani and Dinkins took public money and they could never agree to debate, and people thought that was bad. So they passed a law requiring, so participants are required to debate, and then non-participants who meet certain objective criteria, the same, can be invited by the sponsors. We run the debates, but we have media sponsors, so the non-participants can be invited to debate, because sometimes the non-participant might be a major candidate, and you would want that person to debate. But they're not required. The voter guide, we have both a print voter guide that gets mailed to the house. It's also online, and we do a video voter guide. And all of the voter guide is voluntary, but it's free advertising. So we have a very, very high, the print guide, I think we have like a 96% participation rate, and the video voter guide is a little bit less, because you have to film it in a 2-week period, and sometimes people just can't. The voter guide is printed in English and Spanish throughout the entire city, in English, Spanish, and Chinese in Manhattan, Brooklyn, the Bronx, and in English, Spanish, Korean, Chinese, and Bengali in Queens. We actually have independent budget authority, and that was actually passed by charter referendum. So the money comes from the New York City General Fund. So, and the way that our budget works is that we produce our budget every year in the spring, and the mayor is required to include it in his executive budget unchanged. Now, he can say whatever he wants about the budget in his message, and Mayor Giuliani always had a message for us. But And then, of course, the city council in the discussion between the executive budget and the past budget, there could be changes. And really, again, it's been a credit to the city council that they've really never changed their budget. I think one year, in an off year, they took $1 million. They asked if they could reduce the public fund by $1 million, and that was fine. And but really, they've not changed the budget at all.